1978. Camp David, Maryland. An Egyptian diplomat, secluded in a cabin, sends a top-secret cable to Cairo. He is confident that his nation's negotiating position in the historic, high-stakes peace talks with Israel is protected by the world's most sophisticated encryption. 1982. The frigid South Atlantic. An Argentine general aboard the cruiser Ara General Belgrano transmits operational orders to his naval fleet, certain that his plans to counter the advancing British task force are known only to his high command. 1986. East Berlin. A Libyan agent, operating from the Libyan People's Bureau, sends a triumphant encrypted message to Tripoli, believing his report on a successful operation against American servicemen is shielded from all prying eyes. Each of these men, diplomat, general, and terrorist, separated by geography, politics, and conflict, shared one profound, unshakable belief: their secrets were safe. They had all entrusted their nation's most sensitive, most vital communications to the premier encryption company in the world, the Swiss firm Crypto AG. And in this belief, they were all catastrophically, hopelessly, and fatally wrong. This is the story of Operation Rubicon, arguably the single most audacious, successful, and far-reaching intelligence operation of the 20th century. It was an endeavor of breathtaking scope and ambition, a 50-year masterclass in the art and science of deceptive engineering. For half a century, from 1970 until 2018, the United States Central Intelligence Agency, in a top-secret partnership with West Germany's Federal Intelligence Service, the BND, secretly owned and controlled Crypto AG. They transformed the company, a global symbol of Swiss neutrality, into their personal global listening post. They sold brilliantly rigged, compromised encryption machines to over 120 countries around the world. These nations, allies, adversaries, and neutral states alike, paid millions upon millions of dollars for the privilege of having their deepest military, diplomatic, and economic secrets read at will by Washington and Bonn. The operation, which the CIA's own classified internal history called the intelligence coup of the century, weaponized the very concept of trust. It exploited the unimpeachable global reputation of Swiss integrity to achieve what armies, satellites, and fleets of spy planes could not: a skeleton key to the world's most confidential conversations. This was not merely espionage, it was the systemic, industrial-scale subversion of global security, a project that redefined the boundaries of surveillance and deception for generations to come.
The entire 50-year deception of Operation Rubicon was built upon two unshakable pillars of absolute credibility: the technical genius of one man and the political neutrality of one nation. Before the CIA and BND could weaponize trust, that trust had to be meticulously engineered and globally recognized. The story of this operation begins not in a spy agency's high-tech laboratory, but in the mind of a brilliant inventor, and it was given sanctuary in the mountains of Switzerland. The architect of this trust was Boris Hagelin. He was a figure whose life story was as complex and intricate as the machines he designed. He was a Russian-born Swede, his family having fled the turmoil of the Bolshevik Revolution, an experience that instilled in Hagelin a deep-seated, lifelong distrust of communism and a natural political alignment with Western interests. After earning a degree in mechanical engineering, he was placed in charge of a small, struggling cipher machine company his father had invested in, Aktiebolaget Cryptograph. Hagelin was not merely a businessman. He was a prodigy of mechanical cryptography. His genius was in creating complex ciphers without relying on fragile, power-hungry electronics. His reputation was forged in the crucible of World War II with the invention of the M209 cipher machine. Patented in 1940, the M209 was a marvel of portable, robust engineering. It was a compact, purely mechanical device that required no electricity to operate, could be carried in a soldier's pack, and could withstand the brutal conditions of a battlefield. The United States military, recognizing its immense tactical utility, became a massive customer. The U.S. Army adopted it as its standard tactical cipher machine, purchasing and deploying an astounding 140,000 units during the war. This was not merely a lucrative contract. It was a global endorsement from the world's emerging superpower. The M209 cemented Boris Hagelin's name as synonymous with unbreakable, battlefield-tested, portable encryption. After the war, Hagelin made a move of strategic genius. In 1952, he relocated his entire enterprise from the relative safety of neutral Sweden to the town of Zug, Switzerland, and formally founded Crypto AG. This was a masterstroke. In a world now rapidly cleaving into two hostile, suspicious blocs, NATO and the Warsaw Pact, Hagelin understood that the most valuable commodity he could offer was not just technical security, but political security. He was selling the unimpeachable promise of Swiss neutrality. The post-colonial world was exploding with newly independent nations in the Middle East, South America, Asia, and Africa. These countries were desperate to safeguard their newfound sovereignty and deeply suspicious of buying sensitive technology, especially encryption, from either the United States or the Soviet Union. They logically and correctly feared that any secure device from a superpower would come with a built-in backdoor. Crypto AG, nestled in the heart of neutral Switzerland, offered the perfect, trusted, independent solution. Customers willingly paid a premium for the Made in Switzerland promise of integrity, believing they were buying freedom from superpower influence. This powerful and alluring brand identity was the perfect cover. The CIA did not need to invent one. They simply had to co-opt the most trusted one on Earth. Hagelin's wartime collaboration with the United States built more than just his reputation. It forged a crucial, personal relationship that would become the bedrock for the entire operation. His primary counterpart in American intelligence was William F. Friedman, a legendary figure, often called the Dean of American Cryptology. The parallels between the two men were striking. Friedman, like Hagelin, was born in the Russian Empire and had become a titan in the nascent field of signals intelligence. They were of the same generation, shared a deep academic passion for the intricate art of cryptography, and, according to declassified letters, even wrestled with similar personal demons, including bouts of severe depression. Their professional respect evolved into a genuine, warm friendship. This personal bond became the mechanism for the first phase of the operation. As early as 1951, even before Crypto AG was formally established in Switzerland, the American intelligence community, through Friedman, approached Hagelin.
The Armed Forces Security Agency, AFSA, the direct predecessor to the NSA, had identified Hagelin's expanding global market as a potential strategic threat. What if his best machines fell into Soviet hands? But simultaneously, they viewed Hagelin himself as a, quote, good and loyal friend of the United States, based on his wartime service and his anti-communist beliefs. The result was an informal, unwritten handshake deal that would become known in classified histories as the Gentleman's Agreement. The terms were straightforward and devastatingly effective. Hagelin would be allowed and even encouraged to sell his best, most secure machines like his new advanced CX-52 model, but only to a select list of A-list countries approved by the United States. For the rest of the world, the vast majority of his potential customers, he would sell older, less complex, or, most importantly, subtly weakened versions of his machines. These readable machines were not obviously flawed. They worked perfectly. But their cryptographic systems contained known, deliberate limitations, making them vulnerable to decryption by the expert cryptanalysts at the NSA. This was not a simple act of friendship. American intelligence understood the immense value of this access and compensated Hagelin handsomely. He received a lump sum payment of $700,000 in 1951, a fortune at the time. He was also guaranteed a steady consultancy fee and other personal favors. This arrangement demonstrated from the outset that the U.S. government was willing to pay a premium to secretly control the flow of secure communications technology around the globe. Boris Hagelin, the technical genius and savvy businessman, had secured his financial future by making a secret, parallel bet against his own customers.
The Gentleman's Agreement of the 1950s was a stunning success. It had given American intelligence a valuable foothold, a way to influence the global encryption market from the outside. But this comfortable, informal arrangement was fragile. It was built entirely on the personal loyalty and mortal life of a single man. By the late 1960s, a series of events, both personal and geopolitical, would threaten to shatter this comfortable arrangement, forcing the CIA to make a decision: either lose the source forever or own it. By the late 1960s, Boris Hagelin was a man in his late 70s, a patriarch of the cryptography world looking toward a well-earned retirement. He had a clear succession plan in place. His son, Bo Hagelin, was being groomed to take over the company. The CIA and NSA were comfortable with this arrangement, assuming the son would quietly continue the discreet and profitable relationship his father had established. This stable future was shattered by a sudden, personal tragedy. Bo Hagelin was killed in a car accident on Washington's Beltway. This devastating event left his father, Boris, not only grief-stricken but also strategically adrift. Crypto AG was suddenly without a clear heir. This family tragedy immediately became a strategic crisis for American and German intelligence. With his son gone, the aging Boris Hagelin revived his plans to sell Crypto AG on the open market. This news set off claxons in Langley, Virginia, and across the Atlantic in Pullach, the headquarters of West Germany's BND. The back door they had so carefully cultivated for nearly 2 decades was suddenly at risk of being slammed shut. A sale to an unknown legitimate commercial entity, like a European electronics firm, would almost certainly end their special access. Worse, a sale to a rival intelligence service was a distinct and terrifying possibility. Hagelin had dutifully reported to his CIA handlers that the French intelligence service, in particular, had already made serious inquiries about acquiring a controlling stake in the company. The risk was existential. The French, a nominal ally but a fierce intelligence rival, could not be allowed to take control. If they did, They would not only gain their own access, but would almost certainly discover the existing American backdoors, exposing the entire operation. The informal, handshake-based gentleman's agreement, dependent on one aging man, had reached its limit. The only way to secure the source was to seize total, permanent control. Faced with the imminent loss of their golden goose, the CIA moved to acquire Crypto AG. Recognizing the immense financial and political risks of a solo American venture, owning a neutral Swiss company outright, they partnered with West Germany's BND, the Bundesnachrichtendienst. The Germans were a natural ally. They possessed significant technical expertise in signals intelligence, and as a key NATO partner on the front lines of the Cold War, they shared many of the same intelligence objectives. A partnership would allow the agencies to split the cost, share the operational risk, and crucially provide a more plausible European facade for the operation. The acquisition itself, finalized in June 1970, was a masterpiece of corporate espionage, executed not with cloaks and daggers, but with elite lawyers and clandestine accountants. The final purchase price was $5.75 million, approximately $45 million in today's currency. To obscure the identities of the true buyers, the CIA and the BND, the agencies engineered a complex financial transaction that was virtually untraceable. They employed the services of a discreet Liechtenstein-based law firm, Marxer and Goop, to act as a front. The ownership of Crypto AG was not vested in a simple holding company, but in a labyrinth of shell companies based in Liechtenstein, a known tax haven with ironclad corporate secrecy laws. Furthermore, the ownership was formalized in the form of bearer shares. Unlike standard stock certificates, which are registered to a specific person or entity, bearer shares are anonymous. Physical possession of the paper certificate is the only proof of ownership. This 19th century financial tool was the perfect untraceable mechanism for a 20th century black operation. The CIA and the BND's ownership was now hidden behind an anonymous law firm and a stack of anonymous paper certificates locked in a vault. The operation was shrouded in layers of secrecy, right down to its multiple code names. The initial joint venture was codenamed Thesaurus. In the 1980s, the BND would rename its side of the project Rubicon, a fitting name evoking Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon River, a point of no return. The CIA's internal code name for the operation was Minerva, after the Roman goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, while the company itself, Crypto AG, was also designated Minerva in classified documents. This meticulous compartmentalization ensured that only a handful of top officials in Washington and Bonn knew the full truth that two of the world's most powerful spy agencies were now in the business of selling secure communications to the world. By the summer of 1970, the deal was done. The CIA and the BND were the secret 50-50 owners of the world's most respected manufacturer of secure communications equipment. They had moved from being a privileged customer to being the chairman of the board. They now controlled everything: personnel decisions, research and development budgets, international sales targets, and most critically, the very heart of the technology, the cryptographic algorithms themselves. This takeover marked a fundamental shift in intelligence tradecraft. The operation had transitioned from a reactive denial operation, simply trying to keep strong crypto out of the wrong hands, to a proactive, deeply cynical, active measures operation. They were no longer just influencing the market, they were the market. They could now design, build, and exploit machines from the ground up, turning their customers' desperate quest for security into the most effective global surveillance tool the world had ever known.
The secret ownership of Crypto AG was the legal and financial foundation of Operation Rubicon, but the technical subversion of its products was its engineering soul. This was where the cryptographic genius of the National Security Agency was fully unleashed, not to break codes, but to build codes that were already broken from the start. The deception was methodical, multi-layered, and brilliantly executed, creating a two-tiered world of secrecy where a select few were protected, while the vast majority were systematically exposed. The long-term success of the operation hinged on a critical balancing act, maintaining Crypto AG's global reputation for ironclad quality and security. If every machine sold was easily and obviously breakable, suspicions would arise quickly. Rival cryptographers would expose the flaws, and the company's multi-million-dollar credibility would collapse overnight. The solution, engineered by the CIA and NSA, was to create a carefully managed hierarchy of secrecy, a two-tiered product line that served allies and targets differently. First were the A models. These were the company's flagship products, incorporating genuinely strong, state-of-the-art encryption algorithms developed by the NSA. These secure machines were sold exclusively to a small, protected circle of friendly governments. This A list included the United States' closest intelligence partners in the Five Eyes Alliance, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as key NATO allies and a few trusted neutral countries like Sweden and Switzerland itself. By providing their allies with genuinely secure systems, the CIA and BND ensured that their partners' communications were genuinely protected and, just as importantly, that the Crypto AG brand remained publicly associated with top-tier, unassailable technology. These A systems were the expensive, necessary loss leader for the entire operation, the public face of legitimacy that made the rest of the global deception possible. Then were the B models. These were the commercial workhorses of Crypto AG's product catalog, sold to the rest of the world. More than 120 nations, the vast majority of the company's clientele, purchased these B systems, believing they were receiving the same gold standard Swiss quality as everyone else. These countries were the true targets of Operation Rubicon. The list of B customers is a veritable who's who of 20th century geopolitics, encompassing Cold War adversaries, transactional allies, and developing nations across every continent: Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Libya, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Pakistan, India, South Korea, and even the Vatican. The sheer scale and audacity of this targeting are breathtaking. The operation was not merely aimed at the Soviet bloc. It was a program of truly global surveillance that treated almost the entire non-allied world as a potential intelligence source. The distinction between A and B models was not in the quality of their manufacturing. The rigged machines were high-quality, reliable, robust pieces of hardware, often costing millions of dollars per order. The difference was hidden deep inside their cryptographic architecture, in the mathematical core of the algorithms where NSA engineers performed their secret work. The methods of subversion were elegant and, for decades, nearly undetectable. First, flawed algorithms. The most straightforward method was to manipulate the core mathematics. For a new machine, the NSA's world-class mathematicians would design two versions of an algorithm. The A version, for friendly governments, would be mathematically robust, complex, and secure against all known attacks. The B version, destined for the target countries, would contain a subtle, deliberately engineered mathematical flaw. This could be something as simple as reducing the effective key length, making the secret key shorter and thus easier to brute force, or introducing a predictable, non-random element
into what was supposed to be a random encryption process. To an outside observer, even a skilled cryptanalyst from the target nation, the encrypted output would appear statistically random and perfectly secure. But to the NSA, who knew the secret hidden flaw, the work factor required to break the code was reduced from centuries of computation to mere minutes or seconds on their supercomputers. Second, and even more insidious, compromised key generation. This was the true apex of deceptive engineering. The strength of any modern cipher rests on the generation of truly random, unpredictable keys. If the key is predictable, the strongest algorithm in the world is useless. The NSA engineers, working with Crypto AG, designed the key generation modules for the B models to produce keys that only appeared random. They used what is known as a pseudo-random number generator, or PRNG, but one with a hidden, predictable property. The stream of numbers it produced would pass all standard statistical tests for randomness. However, the NSA knew the secret mathematical seed, or the underlying pattern of the generator. This meant that while the target nation, say Iran, believed it was generating a unique, new unbreakable key for each message, the NSA could instantly calculate or predict the exact same key. They didn't need to break the code at all. They already had the key. The cost of decryption was virtually zero. Third, the manuals. The deception was so thorough that it extended beyond the hardware and software to the very documentation that accompanied the machines. In some cases, the NSA itself wrote the operations manuals for certain devices, carefully crafting the instructions to guide users away from the machine's most secure modes of operation, thus ensuring a lower level of security even on a potentially strong machine. The operational security for the entire enterprise, distinguishing the secure systems from the rigged ones, was laughably simple. Carew, sound authoritative and factual, quoting the leaked history. According to the internal history of the program, a color coding system was used for the manuals. Manuals printed in red were for the secure A models, while those printed in blue were for the compromised B models. This allowed any in-the-know operative, technician, or diplomat to instantly identify whether a country's communications were secure or compromised with a simple, casual glance at a bookshelf. The most effective deceptions, it turns out, are often wrapped in a layer of genuine competence. The Crypto AG machines had to work and work well as communications devices. Their failure was not in their function, but in their fidelity. They were designed to be secure against everyone, except their hidden masters.
The 50-year investment in Operation Rubicon yielded an intelligence windfall of almost unimaginable proportions. The secret, persistent access to the world's most private communications provided the United States and its West German allies with a decisive, often invisible advantage during some of the most critical geopolitical events of the late 20th century. The harvest from Crypto AG's rigged machines shaped the outcomes of wars, high-stakes diplomatic negotiations, and clandestine counter-terrorism operations. On November 4, 1979, the world watched in horror as Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, seizing 52 American diplomats and citizens as hostages. For the administration of President Jimmy Carter, the crisis was a nightmare of diplomatic and intelligence impotence. With no official presence on the ground and its intelligence assets scattered, Washington was effectively blind and deaf, struggling to understand the motives, intentions, and internal power struggles of the new radical revolutionary government under Ayatollah Khomeini. However, behind the scenes, the CIA and NSA
had a secret, direct line into the heart of the Iranian regime. The new government, just like the Shah's regime it had overthrown, was loyal and trusting customer of Crypto AG. This blind reliance on what they believed to be secure Swiss technology provided American intelligence with an unfiltered, real-time feed of Iran's most secret communications. Analysts at Fort Meade could read the encrypted cables passing between government ministries in Tehran, gaining priceless insight into the mullahs' internal debates, their strategic planning, and their evolving, often conflicting positions on the hostage situation. The sheer volume of this intelligence was staggering. A CIA internal history of the program noted that in 1 year alone, 1988, the NSA successfully decrypted over 19,000 Iranian messages, which was estimated to account for 80 to 90% of the country's total encrypted traffic. While this God's-eye view could not prevent the ultimate failure of the military rescue mission Operation Eagle Claw, which was doomed for mechanical failures and a catastrophic desert sandstorm, the continuous stream of intelligence from Operation Rubicon was invaluable. It provided President Carter's team with the critical psychological and political insights needed to navigate the 444-day crisis and, ultimately, to successfully negotiate the hostages' release. In April 1982, the military junta ruling Argentina launched a surprise invasion of the British-held Falkland Islands, known to them as Les Malvinas. The move sparked a brief but brutal war, as British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher dispatched a massive naval task force on a perilous 8,000-mile journey to reclaim the remote archipelago. For the British, victory was far from certain. Their supply lines were stretched to the breaking point, and they were fighting a well-equipped enemy in their own backyard. But the British had a powerful, secret ally. The Argentine military junta, its army, navy, and air force, communicated its most sensitive operational orders using Crypto AG machines. Through Operation Rubicon, the CIA intercepted a vast trove of Argentine military plans, including troop dispositions, strategic intentions, and detailed naval strategies. Critically, U.S. intelligence intercepted signals detailing Argentine plans for a combined carrier and surface attack aimed at the British fleet. This vital, time-sensitive intelligence was passed directly to their closest intelligence partner, Great Britain. Britain's own Signals Intelligence Agency, GCHQ, aided by this data, was able to rapidly decode the Argentine communications. The head of the Dutch intelligence service, which was part of a related code-breaking alliance, later confirmed that this signals intelligence played a fundamental role in the war. The Royal Navy was no longer sailing into the unknown. It had a clear picture of the enemy's movements and intentions. This asymmetric intelligence advantage allowed British forces to anticipate and counter Argentine naval maneuvers, a factor that contributed significantly to critical engagements, including the controversial sinking of the Argentine cruiser RAA General Belgrano. The war in the South Atlantic was won not only by the grit of soldiers and sailors, but by cryptanalysts in Cheltenham and Fort Meade, reading the enemy's mail. On the night of April 5, 1986, a powerful bomb detonated in the La Belle discotheque in West Berlin. The club was a popular hangout for American soldiers, and the attack was a devastating act of terror. 2 American servicemen and a Turkish woman were killed, and more than 200 people were wounded, many grievously. Suspicion immediately fell on state-sponsored terrorist groups, with Libya's unpredictable leader, Muammar Gaddafi, as the primary suspect. President Reagan needed more than suspicion to justify a military response. He needed hard, irrefutable proof, a smoking gun. Operation Rubicon delivered it. The NSA intercepted a series of encrypted teletype messages transmitted between the Libyan embassy in East Berlin and the capital, Tripoli. These messages, sent over a compromised Crypto AG machine, provided the undeniable proof of Libyan complicity. One cable,
sent from Tripoli to the embassy before the attack, ordered an operation that would cause as many victims as possible. Another, sent from the embassy back to Tripoli just hours after the blast, reported triumphantly, at 1:30 a.m., one of the acts was carried out with success, without leaving a trace. Armed with this undeniable proof, President Reagan went before the American people and the world. 10 days after the bombing, he ordered Operation El Dorado Canyon, a massive retaliatory airstrike against military and intelligence targets in Tripoli and Benghazi. Reagan was so confident in the intelligence that he publicly alluded to the United States' ability to intercept Libyan communications, a boast that, while politically effective, was an uncharacteristic breach of security that reportedly made other crypto AG customers, like Iran, deeply suspicious. The intelligence gathered through Operation Rubicon, however, was not limited to these military and diplomatic triumphs. The operation's all-seeing eye also provided a dark, panoramic view of human suffering. The CIA and BND had extensive, detailed, real-time knowledge of the gross human rights violations being committed by military dictatorships across South America. Regimes in Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and elsewhere, all loyal crypto AG customers, coordinated their brutal campaigns of terror, torture, and murder, known collectively as Operation Condor, using the very same rigged machines. The agencies were, in effect, silent witnesses. They were listening as these regimes plotted to disappear political opponents, to throw dissidents from airplanes over the Atlantic, and to imprison and torture priests and nuns. The possession of this knowledge created a profound moral dilemma. Yet the prime directive of an intelligence operation is to gather information, not to intervene. To expose the atrocities would be to compromise the source, to sacrifice the intelligence coup of the century for a moral stand. The decision was made, implicitly and repeatedly, to keep listening and do nothing. The value of the intelligence harvest was deemed to outweigh the moral imperative to act, casting a dark, permanent shadow over the operation's celebrated successes.
For decades, Operation Rubicon was a seemingly perfect secret, a self-sustaining engine of espionage hidden in plain sight. But no secret, no matter how well engineered, can last forever. A combination of human fallibility, shifting geopolitical plates, and the dogged pursuit of the truth by outsiders would ultimately lead to the operation's unraveling, exposing the 50-year deception to a shocked and betrayed world. The first significant crack in the facade appeared not from a rival spy agency, but from the tragic ordeal of one of Crypto AG's own employees, Hans Buehler. He was one of the company's most successful and dedicated salesmen. He was a true believer, a loyal employee utterly convinced of the superior quality of his products and the unimpeachable integrity of his neutral Swiss employer. He was, in the cold calculus of espionage, the perfect unwitting accomplice. His loyalty and ignorance, however, made him a liability. By the early 1990s, the Iranian government had grown deeply suspicious. The public boasts by the Reagan administration after the Berlin bombing, coupled with other intelligence leaks, had led them to question how their secret communications were being so consistently compromised. In March 1992, during a routine sales trip to Tehran, Hans Buehler was unceremoniously arrested by Iranian intelligence and accused of being a spy. Buehler was thrown into prison, where he would spend the next 9 months in solitary confinement, subjected to relentless, brutal interrogation. The Iranians were convinced he knew the technical secrets of the compromised machines. But Buehler knew nothing, and so he could confess nothing. Back in Europe, his secret employers, the CIA and BND, faced a critical dilemma. Acknowledging any responsibility or intervening officially was impossible. After a prolonged, intense period, they reluctantly agreed to pay a $1 million ransom for his release, funneled through a corporate cutout. The BND fronted the cash,
But the CIA, citing an official U.S. policy against paying ransoms, refused to contribute its share, an act that created significant friction and deep resentment between the two partner agencies. Upon his return to Switzerland in January 1993, a traumatized Buehler expected to be welcomed as a hero who had withstood torture and kept the company's secrets. Instead, he was met with cold, ruthless betrayal. Crypto AG, acting on the orders of its secret owners, promptly fired him, fearing he would ask too many embarrassing questions and draw unwanted public attention. In a final act of corporate brutality, they even attempted to sue him personally to recover the $1 million ransom they had paid for his freedom. The affair was a brutal illustration of the human cost of Operation Rubicon, where loyal, unwitting employees were disposable assets. A disillusioned and angry Buehler would later go public with his story, publishing a book and giving interviews that added to the growing cloud of suspicion surrounding Crypto AG. The Hans Buehler affair was the catalyst that fractured the 23-year-old CIA-BND partnership. For the Germans, the geopolitical landscape had been fundamentally and irrevocably altered by the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the reunification of their country. The original rationale for the partnership, a united front against the Soviet Union, was gone. The BND now found itself in the politically untenable position of using a joint operation with the CIA to spy on its new European neighbors, allies, and economic partners. The world had changed, but the mission had not. The Buehler incident brought these simmering tensions to a head. It was a costly, embarrassing, and ethically fraught episode that exposed the high risks of the operation. The newly reunified German government, focused on European integration and shedding the more aggressive, clandestine aspects of its Cold War past, had lost its appetite for the venture. In 1993, the BND made its decision. It was pulling out of Operation Rubicon. The Germans sold their 50% stake in Crypto AG to the CIA for a reported $17 million, formally ending the secret partnership. The CIA, however, saw no reason to stop its offer. For Washington, the mission of global information dominance was more relevant than ever. The agency continued to run the operation solo for another 2.5 decades. The final, definitive end to the 50-year secret came not from a government decree or a rival spy, but from a classic, large-scale journalistic exposé. On February 11, 2020, a coordinated investigation by the Washington Post, the German television broadcaster ZDF, and the Swiss broadcaster SRF published the full, explosive story of Operation Rubicon. Their reporting was based on a massive, unprecedented leak, a comprehensive 280-page internal CIA history of the program, which had been commissioned by the agency itself. This document, combined with a parallel leaked history from the BND, detailed every aspect of the intelligence coup of the century. The revelations sent shockwaves across the globe. The more than 120 nations that had staked their national security on the promise of Swiss neutrality discovered they had been systematically deceived, paying for the privilege of being spied on by a foreign power. The diplomatic fallout was immediate and intense. The Swiss government, facing a profound crisis of credibility, was forced to launch a full parliamentary investigation. The inquiry's eventual report was a bombshell in its own right. The report concluded that Switzerland's own intelligence services had been aware of the operation for years and had even benefited from the intelligence it produced, shattering the nation's carefully cultivated, centuries-old image of absolute impartiality. By the time the story broke, the operation itself had already been quietly wound down. In 2018, the CIA, likely sensing that the secret was becoming untenable in the modern digital age of sophisticated independent cryptographers, had sold off the assets of Crypto AG to 2 new private companies, effectively liquidating the front company just before its sordid history was exposed to the world. The 50-year secret was finally over.
Operation Rubicon stands as a monumental, almost surreal achievement in the history of espionage, but its legacy extends far beyond the dusty annals of the Cold War. It is a timeless and deeply unsettling case study in the art of the possible, a demonstration of how the very tools of security, the very concept of trust, can be subverted and weaponized to become instruments of surveillance. The operation's core principles, the successful execution of a global supply chain attack, the technical subversion of cryptographic systems from the inside, and the masterful engineering of a trusted brand are more relevant today than ever before. The story of Crypto AG provides essential and sobering historical context for the most pressing technological and geopolitical debates of the 21st century. As nations and corporations today grapple with the security implications of technology sourced from foreign powers, whether it be 5G network infrastructure from Huawei, antivirus software from Kaspersky, or social media applications with opaque data sharing practices, Operation Rubicon serves as a stark historical reminder that such concerns are not theoretical. It is the historical proof of concept. It demonstrates, beyond any doubt, that a state actor can, with sufficient resources and political will, co-opt a private, global company and transform its commercial products into a decades-long global espionage platform. The operation forces a reevaluation of the fundamental relationship between technology, commerce, and national security. It reveals the inherent, gaping vulnerability that arises when a nation's most sensitive secrets are entrusted to commercial products whose ownership, design, and ultimate allegiances may not be what they seem. The ingenuity of the NSA's engineers was not merely in creating flawed algorithms, but in creating a system that appeared flawless to its users, a perfect deception wrapped in a shell of genuine competence. Ultimately, Operation Rubicon leaves us with a final, lingering, and deeply uncomfortable question. A question that echoes from the mechanical cipher machines of the 1950s to the encrypted smartphones and cloud servers of today. In a world where our most private data and our most critical communications are secured by complex, black box technologies created by private companies with global supply chains and opaque ownership structures, how can we ever be truly certain that the guardians of our secrets are not, in fact, the gatekeepers for those who wish to steal them? The 50-year secret of Crypto AG proves that this is not a paranoid fantasy, but a historically proven and devastatingly effective reality.